He was Manhattan's most mysterious billionaire, untouchable, unreachable, and hiding a secret that would shock the world. She was just the maid who cleaned his penthouse, until one stormy night changed everything.
I've never trusted anyone enough. Until you. I've never done that before.
Never. Adrian, what are you saying?
His first kiss, his first love, his first time feeling anything. But when his billionaire family discovers their son's heart belongs to the help, they'll stop at nothing to destroy her.
I don't care about any of that. All I care about is how I feel when I'm with you.
Your family will never accept me. We come from different worlds.
Now he must choose a billion-dollar empire, or the woman who taught him how to feel. Will a man who's never loved risk losing everything for his first and only chance at real love? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse on the 85th floor of Manhattan's most exclusive address. Delilah Moore adjusted her simple black uniform and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear before pressing the service elevator button. At 26, she was younger than most of the staff who worked in the building, but her references were impeccable and her work ethic unmatched. "Remember what Grandma always said," she whispered to herself as the elevator climbed. "You are not small, don't let anyone shrink you." The doors opened directly into the private foyer of the Lock penthouse. As always, the massive apartment was spotlessly clean, her doing, and eerily quiet. Delilah set down her bag and went through her morning routine, checking her cleaning schedule for the day. "Good morning, Ms. Moore." The voice made her jump. Adrian Locke stood in the doorway of his home office, dressed in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than she made in 3 months. At 29, he was one of the youngest billionaires in the country, having inherited his family's tech empire. His dark hair was neatly combed, his face freshly shaved. Unlike most wealthy men she'd worked for, he always looked at her directly when speaking. "Good morning, Mr. Locke. I didn't realize you were home today." Delilah straightened her posture, maintaining her professional demeanor. "I have a video conference in an hour. I'll be working from home." He hesitated, as if wanting to say something more, then simply nodded and returned to his office. Delilah had been working in the Locke penthouse for 6 months now. Unlike other wealthy employers who treated her like she was invisible, Adrian Locke always acknowledged her presence. He never made a mess deliberately or spoke down to her, but he rarely smiled and kept mostly to himself. The gossip among the building staff painted an interesting picture. Adrian Locke had no scandals, no known girlfriends, not even rumors of secret relationships. Some said he was strange, others suggested more unkind theories. Delilah didn't participate in such talk. It wasn't her business what her employer did or didn't do in his personal life. As she dusted the living room, she began to hum softly, an old gospel song her grandmother had taught her. The familiar melody was comforting as she moved efficiently around the spacious room. "That's beautiful." Delilah turned to find Adrian standing nearby, a cup of coffee in his hand. "I'm sorry, Mr. Locke, I didn't mean to disturb you." "You didn't." He took a sip from his cup. "What's that song?" "Just an old hymn my grandmother used to sing." Delilah shifted uncomfortably. Most employers didn't engage in personal conversations. Adrian nodded. "My conference was cancelled. I'll be in my office if you need anything." He turned and walked away, his footsteps silent on the plush carpet. Delilah watched him go, puzzled by the brief interaction. In the 6 months she'd worked here, that was the longest conversation they'd had. That evening, as Delilah returned to her modest apartment in Queens, she found a letter in her mailbox. The rent was going up again. She sighed, calculating the numbers in her head. Between helping her grandmother with medical bills and her own expenses, things were already tight. "I'll figure it out," she told herself as she unlocked her door. "I always do." Her phone buzzed with a text from her friend Tanya. "Girls' night tomorrow? Jason's cousin is in town and he's cute." Delilah smiled but texted back, "Can't. Picking up extra shifts." It wasn't entirely true. She could have gone out, but blind dates arranged by well-meaning friends never worked out. The last one had spent the entire evening talking about how exotic she looked. The one before that had asked if she could hook him up with a job at one of the wealthy homes where she worked. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind. The right man will see you, Delilah. Really see you. So far, no one had. The next morning, Delilah arrived at the penthouse to find a note on the kitchen counter. Ms. Moore, we'll be out until Thursday. Security has instructions to let you in as usual. A. Locke. It wasn't unusual. Mr. Locke traveled frequently for business. Delilah appreciated the courtesy of letting her know, something her previous employers had rarely bothered with. As she cleaned the already immaculate apartment, she wondered about the man who lived here. Despite the penthouse's massive size and obvious luxury, it felt unlived in. No personal photos adorned the walls, no mementos or souvenirs sat on shelves. It was like a showroom, not a home. The only exception was the library. That room, with its floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and comfortable leather chairs, felt different. The books weren't just for show, they were well-read, with cracked spines and dog-eared pages. Sometimes she found one left open on the side table, as if Mr. Locke had been interrupted mid-sentence. Today she noticed a new book on the coffee table, a collection of poetry. She wouldn't have pegged Adrian Locke as a poetry reader. As she carefully dusted around it, she couldn't help but glance at the open page. A line caught her eye. The loneliest moment in someone's life is when they are watching their whole world fall apart, and all they can do is stare blankly. Something about those words made her pause. She closed the book gently and continued with her work. Thursday morning, Delilah arrived to find the penthouse still empty. She went about her usual routine, starting with the kitchen. As she wiped down the marble counters, the elevator chimed. Adrian Locke stepped out, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. His tie was loosened, and his normally perfect hair was mussed, as if he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. "Good morning, Mr. Locke. Welcome back." He looked startled, as if he'd forgotten she would be there. "Ms. Moore?" "Yes." "Thank you." He headed straight for the bar cart in the corner of the living room and poured himself a drink, despite it being barely 9 a.m. Delilah pretended not to notice as she continued wiping down the counters. "Do you have family, Ms. Moore?" The question came suddenly, breaking the silence. Delilah looked up, surprised. "My grandmother. She raised me." Adrian nodded, taking a sip of his drink. "That's nice, to have someone who cares." There was something in his voice, a rawness she hadn't heard before. Delilah hesitated, then asked, "Are you all right, Mr. Locke?" He gave a short, humorless laugh. "Fine. Just a lovely family dinner with my parents. Always a treat." The bitterness in his tone was unmistakable. Delilah didn't know how to respond. This kind of personal conversation wasn't part of her job description. "I'm sorry to hear that," she finally said. Adrian looked at her, really looked at her, as if seeing her for the first time. "Why do you work here, Ms. Moore? You're clearly intelligent, well-spoken. You could do better than cleaning up after someone like me." The question caught her off guard. "I need the money, Mr. Locke. My grandmother's medical bills. And this job pays better than most." He nodded slowly. "Practical. I respect that." He finished his drink in one swallow. "I'll be in my office. Don't worry about cleaning in there today." As he walked away, Delilah couldn't help but feel she'd just witnessed something important. A crack in the perfect facade of Adrian Locke. Over the next few weeks, something shifted in the dynamic between them. Adrian was home more often when she cleaned. Their conversations remained brief but became more frequent. He asked about the songs she hummed. She learned he preferred coffee black in the morning but with cream in the afternoon. Small things, meaningless things. And yet, Delilah found herself looking forward to these brief exchanges. One morning she arrived to find a small box on the kitchen counter with her name on it. Inside was a book of gospel music, the very hymns she often hummed while working. There was no note, no explanation. When Adrian emerged from his office later that morning, she thanked him. "I noticed you never have the music with you," he said simply. "I thought you might like it." "It's very thoughtful, Mr. Locke. Thank you." He nodded, looking almost embarrassed. "It's nothing." But it wasn't nothing. It was the first personal gift Delilah had received from an employer. That weekend, Adrian's parents came to visit. Delilah wasn't scheduled to work, but Mrs. Locke had insisted on a deep clean before their arrival, offering triple her usual rate for the Saturday work. Delilah arrived early, hoping to finish before the locks showed up. But as she was vacuuming the guest room, she heard voices from the living room. "Really, Adrian, it's been long enough. This solitary existence of yours is becoming embarrassing." The woman's voice was sharp, cutting. "Mother, we've discussed this. I'm not interested in your matchmaking. It's not normal for a man your age to be so uninvolved. People are starting to talk. Let them talk. Your father and I are concerned. Is there something you're not telling us?" Adrian's laugh was cold. "What exactly are you implying, Mother? Don't be obtuse. You know exactly what I mean. A man your age, with your resources, should have a proper relationship, a fiancé at least. Instead, you hide away in this mausoleum. It's not natural." Delilah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment at overhearing such a personal conversation. She turned off the vacuum and tried to make herself scarce, moving to the far end of the penthouse. Later, as she was gathering her things to leave, Adrian appeared in the kitchen doorway. "I apologize that you had to work today, Ms. Moore." "It's fine, Mr. Locke. The extra money is helpful." He hesitated, then said, "And I apologize if you overheard any of my mother's comments. She can be rather pointed in her opinions." Delilah felt her face grow warm. "It's not my place to listen to or judge private conversations, Mr. Locke." He looked at her for a long moment. "You're very kind, Ms. Moore. I've noticed that about you. Kind without expectation of return." The compliment flustered her. "I should go. Your parents will be wondering where you are." "They can wonder." But he stepped aside to let her pass. "Have a good weekend, Delilah." It was the first time he'd used her first name. The following week brought heavy rains to the city. Delilah arrived at work soaking wet despite her umbrella. Adrian offered her a towel and insisted she take a moment to dry off before starting work. "You'll catch cold otherwise," he said. "And then who will keep this place in order?" There was something different about him that day, a nervousness she hadn't seen before. He lingered in rooms where she was working, starting conversations about books, music, the weather, anything, it seemed, to keep her talking. Finally, as she was preparing to leave, he asked, "Would you stay for a cup of tea, Delilah? There's something I'd like to discuss." Warning bells rang in her head. In her experience, male employers who suddenly wanted to discuss things after hours rarely had professional matters in mind. Seeing her hesitation, Adrian quickly added, "It's about a raise and possibly expanded duties, all completely professional, I assure you." Cautiously, Delilah agreed. Adrian prepared the tea himself, which surprised her. They sat at the kitchen island, an unusual formality between employer and housekeeper. "I've been very impressed with your work," Adrian began, "and I find myself in need of additional household management. My schedule is becoming more demanding, and I could use someone to oversee more aspects of the household. Groceries, meal preparation, perhaps some correspondence. It would come with a significant increase in salary, of course." Delilah considered the offer. The money would certainly help with her grandmother's mounting medical bills, and despite her initial concerns, Adrian Locke had never been anything but respectful. "I would be interested, Mr. Locke, though I should mention I'm not a trained chef. I eat simply anyway, and please, if we're to work more closely, I'd prefer if you called me Adrian." It felt strange, this shift in their professional relationship, but Delilah found herself nodding. "I can start next week with the new responsibilities." "Adrian." His name felt foreign on her tongue, but the smile it brought to his face, the first real smile she'd seen from him, made something flutter in her chest. "Excellent. My assistant will email you the details of the new arrangement." As Delilah left the penthouse that evening, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just crossed some invisible boundary, and she wasn't entirely sure what waited on the other side. The new arrangement began the following Monday. Delilah now arrived earlier and stayed later. She managed the household ordering, prepared simple meals that Adrian could heat up later, and organized his personal correspondence. It was during this last task that she began to truly understand Adrian Locke. The man received almost no personal mail. Everything was business-related, formal, cold. No birthday cards, no friendly notes, no invitations except to charity galas and business functions. How lonely it must be, she thought, to have so much and yet so little. One evening, as a thunderstorm raged outside, Delilah was finishing up in the kitchen when the lights flickered and went out. The penthouse was plunged into darkness. "Delilah," Adrian's voice called from his office. "I'm here," she replied, using her phone's flashlight to navigate toward his voice. "Power outage from the storm, I think." She found him standing by the window, illuminated by the city lights below and the occasional flash of lightning. For a moment, she was struck by how vulnerable he looked. "I have some candles in the kitchen," she offered. "I can get them." Together, they lit candles around the living room, creating a warm, flickering glow. With no electricity, there was little work Delilah could do, but she felt awkward about leaving Adrian alone in the darkened apartment. "You don't have to stay," he said, seeming to read her thoughts. "I'm sure you want to get home before the storm gets worse. Actually, the subway will be chaos right now. If you don't mind, I'd rather wait a bit to see if the power comes back." Adrian nodded, looking almost relieved. "Of course. Would you like some wine, since we're both stuck here?" It was another boundary crossed, employer and employee sharing a drink. But the unusual circumstances made it seem acceptable. They sat in the living room, the storm raging outside, talking about inconsequential things. "Tell me about your grandmother," Adrian said after a while. "You mention her often." Delilah smiled in the candlelight. "She's the strongest person I know. Raised me after my parents died when I was 7. Worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat, never complained, never made me feel like I was a burden. She sounds remarkable." "She is. She always told me I was meant for something special, that God had a plan for me." Delilah laughed softly. "I'm not sure cleaning penthouses was what she had in mind, but it pays her medical bills, so here I am." Adrian was quiet for a moment. "Is she ill?" "Heart problems. Nothing immediately life-threatening, but she needs expensive medication. And at her age, there's always something new." Another silence fell between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Finally, Adrian spoke again. "My parents think there's something wrong with me." The confession came so suddenly that Delilah wasn't sure how to respond. Adrian continued, his voice low. "They can't understand why I'm not like my brother, always dating models, making the society pages. They think I'm strange, broken somehow." "There's nothing wrong with being selective," Delilah said carefully, "with wanting something real." Adrian looked at her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "Is that what you think I'm doing? Being selective?" Delilah shrugged. "It makes more sense than the alternatives." "Which are? That you're secretly married, or hiding a terrible secret, or just really, really shy." She smiled to show she was joking. Adrian didn't smile back. "What if it's none of those things? What if I just never found anyone I wanted to be close to? Anyone I could trust?" The vulnerability in his voice made Delilah's heart ache. "Then you haven't met the right person yet, that's all." The power came back on suddenly, flooding the room with light. The moment, whatever it had been, was broken. Delilah stood up, smoothing her uniform. "I should go, it's getting late." Adrian nodded, also standing. "Of course, thank you for staying. It was nice not to be alone during the storm." As he walked her to the elevator, Delilah felt a strange reluctance to leave. At the door, Adrian surprised her by taking her hand briefly. "Good night, Delilah. Get home safely." His touch was warm, his eyes sincere. Delilah felt something shift inside her, a dangerous feeling she couldn't afford. "Good night, Adrian." As the elevator doors closed between them, Delilah knew with sudden clarity that this job had just become much more complicated than she'd ever intended. The weeks that followed the storm brought subtle changes to Delilah and Adrian's working relationship. Adrian was home more often. Their conversations grew longer. Sometimes Delilah would find him waiting in the kitchen when she arrived, coffee already made for both of them. "You don't have to do that," she told him one morning, though she secretly enjoyed the gesture. "I know," was all he said, sliding a mug toward her with a small smile. Delilah tried to maintain professional boundaries, but it was becoming increasingly difficult. Adrian never crossed any lines. He never made inappropriate comments or requests, but the way he looked at her sometimes, as if she were a puzzle he was trying to solve, made her pulse quicken. "This is just a job," she reminded herself sternly on her commute home one evening. Don't make it something it's not. But even as she thought it, she knew she was already in dangerous territory. She found herself looking forward to seeing him each day, taking extra care with her appearance, lingering longer than necessary when her work was done. It wasn't just his wealth or his looks that drew her in, it was his unexpected kindness, the way he remembered details about her grandmother, how he'd started leaving books he thought she might enjoy on the kitchen counter. One morning she arrived to find a small package waiting for her. "What's this?" she asked when Adrian emerged from his office. "Your grandmother's birthday is tomorrow, isn't it? You mentioned it last week." Delilah was touched that he'd remembered. She opened the box to find a beautiful silk scarf inside. "It's lovely, but I can't accept this." "Why not?" "It's too expensive and it's not appropriate." Adrian's face fell slightly. "It's just a birthday gift for your grandmother. Nothing more." Delilah hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you. She'll love it." The genuine smile that lit up Adrian's face made something flutter in her chest. It was a feeling she couldn't afford to examine too closely. The following Sunday, Delilah took her grandmother out for her birthday lunch. At 78, Eleanor Moore was still sharp as a tack, with the same keen gaze that had kept Delilah in line throughout her childhood. "So this scarf is much too fine for an old woman like me," she said, running her fingers over the silk. "Where did you get the money for such a thing?" "It was a gift," Delilah admitted, "from my employer." Eleanor's eyebrows shot up. "The rich man whose house you clean. Why would he give me a birthday gift?" "He's just generous, Grandma." Eleanor studied her granddaughter's face carefully. And how often does this generous man give gifts to the families of his employees?" "It's not like that," Delilah protested, but even she could hear the lack of conviction in her voice. "Be careful, child," Eleanor said softly. "Men with money see the world differently. They think everything has a price." "He's not like that," Delilah said. "He's different. That's what makes it dangerous." Eleanor reached across the table and squeezed Delilah's hand. "Just remember what I always taught you. You are not small. Don't let anyone, no matter how rich or handsome, make you feel like you're less than you are." Delilah nodded, but her grandmother's warning stayed with her long after lunch was over. Monday morning, Delilah arrived at the penthouse to find Adrian pacing in the kitchen, looking agitated. "Is everything all right?" she asked, setting down her bag. "My parents are coming to dinner tonight, with my brother and his new girlfriend." Adrian ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd come to recognize as a sign of stress. "Could you stay late? Help with serving the meal? I'll pay you double." "Of course," Delilah agreed, though the thought of spending an evening with Adrian's family filled her with apprehension. Throughout the day, she prepared for the dinner, making sure everything was perfect. Adrian remained on edge, checking and rechecking details that she had well in hand. "It'll be fine," she assured him. "The caterers are the best in the city, and the table looks beautiful." Adrian stopped his pacing and looked at her. "It's not the food or the table I'm worried about. It's them, my family. They can be difficult." "All families have their challenges," Delilah said diplomatically. Adrian gave a short, humorless laugh. "My father will spend the evening talking about how I'm wasting my potential. My mother will make veiled comments about my personal life, and my brother will sit there smugly with his supermodel girlfriend, enjoying every minute of my discomfort." Delilah wished she could offer more comfort, but it wasn't her place. Instead, she simply said, "I'll be here to make sure everything runs smoothly." Adrian looked at her gratefully. "Thank you, Delilah. You're the only person in my life who never wants anything from me except for me to be myself." The simple honesty of his statement made her heart ache. The Locke family arrived precisely at 7. Delilah had changed into a simple black dress that could pass for serving attire, her hair pulled back neatly. She greeted them at the door and took their coats. Adrian's father, Richard Locke, barely glanced at her. His mother, Victoria, gave her a cold once-over before moving into the living room. Adrian's brother, Maxwell, arrived with a stunning blonde woman draped over his arm like an accessory. "Adrian Ann," Maxwell drawled, clapping his brother on the shoulder. "Still living like a monk, I see. Though I must say your taste in household staff has improved. He winked at Delilah, who kept her face carefully neutral. Adrian's jaw tightened. Max, Brianna, welcome. Drinks are in the living room. The evening progressed much as Adrian had predicted. Richard Locke dominated the conversation, discussing business deals and making pointed comments about Adrian's reluctance to take a more public role in the company. Your brother understands the importance of image, Richard said, gesturing to Maxwell. He's on the cover of Business Monthly this week. With Brianna, of course. We make a gorgeous couple, Brianna agreed, tossing her hair. Victoria Locke sipped her wine and added, Image is everything in our position, Adrian. Your continued solitude raises questions. What questions would those be, Mother? Adrian's voice was deceptively calm, but Delilah, refilling water glasses, could see the tension in his shoulders. People talk, darling. They wonder why a handsome, wealthy young man like yourself remains so uninvolved. Maxwell snickered. What Mother is trying to say is that people think you're weird, bro. No girlfriends, no scandals, no anything. It's not normal. Perhaps I have higher standards than collecting arm candy for magazine covers, Adrian said coldly. Brianna's smile faltered. Maxwell's face darkened. At least I know what to do with a woman when I have one. Victoria gasped. Richard barked, Enough, Maxwell! The atmosphere in the dining room was glacial. Delilah wished she could disappear. Instead, she quietly began clearing the dessert plates. I think it's time you all left, Adrian said quietly. Thank you for coming. As Delilah helped them with their coats, Victoria pulled her aside. How long have you worked for my son? She asked, her voice low. Almost 8 months, ma'am. Victoria studied her face. You're very pretty. I can see why he keeps you around. The implication was clear. Delilah felt her cheeks burn. I'm just the housekeeper, Mrs. Locke. Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. Of course you are, dear. After they left, Delilah found Adrian in the library, a glass of whiskey in his hand. The room was dim, lit only by a single lamp. Rain pattered against the windows. I can finish cleaning up tomorrow, she offered. It's getting late. I'm sorry you had to witness that, Adrian said, not looking at her. My family at their finest. It's not my place to judge. Adrian turned to her then, his expression pained. Do you think there's something wrong with me, Delilah? Because I've never done anything with anyone? The raw vulnerability in his voice made her heart squeeze. She moved further into the room, setting down the towel she'd been holding. Nothing's wrong with being careful with your heart, she said softly. Adrian set down his glass and stood up. In the dim light, his eyes looked almost black. He took a step toward her, then stopped as if afraid. I've never trusted anyone enough, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Until now. Delilah knew she should leave. She should make an excuse, walk out, maintain the professional boundary that was already dangerously blurred. Instead, she found herself rooted to the spot as Adrian moved closer. Delilah. Just her name, spoken like a prayer. Then his hands were cradling her face, so gently she could barely feel their weight. His eyes searched hers, asking a silent question. She gave the smallest of nods. Adrian's lips met hers in a kiss so tender it made her eyes sting with tears. It was hesitant, almost reverent. His hands trembled slightly against her cheeks. When he pulled back, the look of wonder on his face took her breath away. I've never done that before, he admitted softly. Delilah stared at him in shock. Never? Adrian shook his head. Never wanted to. Until you. The implications of what had just happened crashed over Delilah like a wave. She stepped back, her mind racing. I should go, she said, her voice unsteady. We shouldn't. Please don't run away, Adrian said, not moving to stop her but looking so vulnerable that it made her chest ache. I know this is complicated. I know you work for me. But what I feel for you is real, Delilah. More real than anything I've ever felt. I need time to think, she said honestly. This isn't... I never expected... Adrian nodded, understanding in his eyes. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. Delilah gathered her things and left, her lips still tingling from the kiss. On the subway ride home, She touched her fingers to her mouth, remembering the gentle pressure of Adrian's lips against hers, his first kiss, given to her. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. The next morning, Delilah arrived at the penthouse with a knot of anxiety in her stomach. She'd barely slept, replaying the kiss over and over in her mind. She'd come to a decision. She needed to be professional, to establish clear boundaries, to pretend it never happened. But when she entered the kitchen, those carefully prepared words died on her lips. Adrian was waiting for her, a single red rose in his hand. "Good morning," he said softly. "Adrian, we need to talk about last night." "I know, but first, I want you to have this." He held out the rose. "And this." He placed a small envelope on the counter. Cautiously, Delilah opened it. Inside was a handwritten note. "Delilah, I've never been good with words, but I want you to know that last night meant everything to me. I understand if you want to keep our relationship professional. I'll respect whatever decision you make. But I needed you to know that you've woken something in me that I didn't know existed. Something I don't want to lose. Yours." Adrian. Delilah looked up, her heart pounding. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything right now," Adrian told her. "I just wanted you to know how I feel." The sincerity in his eyes was her undoing. All her carefully prepared speech about professionalism and boundaries crumbled away. "I feel something too," she admitted quietly. "But I'm scared, Adrian. This is complicated. I work for you. We come from different worlds. Your family would never accept me." "I don't care about any of that," Adrian said firmly. "All I care about is how I feel when I'm with you, how for the first time in my life I want to let someone in." Delilah felt tears pricking at her eyes. "I need to think. This is all happening so fast." Adrian nodded, understanding in his gaze. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here." Over the next week, Delilah tried to maintain a professional distance, but it was increasingly difficult. Adrian respected her need for space, but she could feel his eyes on her as she worked. The tension between them was palpable. Each day, she arrived to find a new note waiting for her. Simple thoughts, observations, things that reminded him of her, never pushing, never demanding, just letting her know in 100 small ways that she was on his mind. On Friday, Delilah received a text from her grandmother. The medication costs had gone up again. The financial pressure was a stark reminder of the reality of her situation. That evening, as she was preparing to leave the penthouse, Adrian asked if she would join him for dinner the following night. "Not here," he clarified quickly. "There's a small Italian place in the village. Very discreet. Just dinner and conversation. Nothing more." Delilah hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, just dinner." The smile that lit up Adrian's face made her heart flip in her chest. The restaurant was exactly as Adrian had described, small, intimate, tucked away on a quiet street. Delilah wore a simple blue dress, one of the few nice outfits she owned. Adrian was waiting for her at a corner table, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him, in a sweater and jeans rather than his usual suits. "You look beautiful," he said as she sat down. The evening passed in a blur of good food and better conversation. Away from the penthouse, without the employer-employee dynamic hanging over them, Delilah found herself relaxing. Adrian told stories about his childhood, his dreams before he'd been forced into the family business. She shared memories of her grandmother, her hopes for the future. It felt normal, natural, as if they were just two people getting to know each other. After dinner, Adrian walked her to the subway, his hand occasionally brushing against hers. At the entrance, he stopped. "Thank you for tonight," he said softly, "for giving us a chance." Delilah looked up at him, at the vulnerability and hope in his eyes. Without overthinking it, she rose on her tiptoes and pressed a gentle kiss to his lips. "Good night, Adrian." His smile could have lit up the entire city. On Monday morning, Delilah arrived at work to find Adrian on the phone, his expression grim. He hung up as soon as he saw her. "What's wrong?" she asked. Adrian handed her his tablet. On the screen was a gossip website, the headline blaring, "Billionaire bachelor Adrian Locke's secret romance with Maid." Below was a grainy photo of them outside the restaurant, Delilah kissing Adrian goodbye. Her stomach dropped. How did they... Someone recognized me at the restaurant, Adrian said tightly. Sold the story to the highest bidder. Delilah sank into a chair, her legs suddenly weak. What does this mean? Adrian knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. It means nothing, Delilah. Nothing changes how I feel about you. But your family, your company, I don't care about any of that. The fierce determination in his voice almost made her believe him. Let them talk. Let them speculate. What we have is ours, not theirs. Before she could respond, Adrian's phone rang again. He glanced at it and grimaced. It's my father. As he took the call in his office, Delilah scrolled through the article, her chest tightening with each paragraph. The piece was full of insinuations, that she was a gold digger, that Adrian was having some kind of breakdown, that it was all a publicity stunt. When Adrian returned, his face was like thunder. My father demands I end this nonsense immediately. His words, not mine. Maybe he's right, Delilah said, her voice small. Maybe this is a mistake. Don't say that. Adrian sat beside her, taking her hands again. What we have isn't a mistake. It's the only thing in my life that feels real. Delilah wanted to believe him, but the reality of their situation was crashing down around them. How your family will never accept me. The press will never leave us alone. How can this possibly work? I don't know, Adrian admitted, but I want to try. If you do. The hope in his eyes was her undoing. Despite every rational thought screaming that this was a bad idea, Delilah nodded. I want to try too. Adrian's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. He leaned forward, kissing her softly. Then we'll figure it out together. As Delilah left the penthouse that evening, she couldn't shake the feeling that their problems were just beginning. But for the first time in her life, she was willing to fight for something that seemed impossible. Because Adrian Locke, billionaire, recluse, the man who had given her his first kiss, was looking at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. The following days brought a media frenzy. Reporters camped outside the building. Gossip sites posted new, exclusive stories daily, each more outlandish than the last. Delilah's phone rang constantly with calls from unknown numbers. Adrian was a rock through it all. He hired security to escort Delilah to and from the subway. He had his lawyers send cease and desist letters to the most aggressive publications. He held her hand and promised it would blow over soon. But the worst was yet to come. On Thursday, Adrian's parents arrived unannounced at the penthouse. Delilah was organizing the kitchen when she heard raised voices from the living room. This has gone on long enough, Adrian, Richard Locke's voice boomed. The board is concerned. Our stock is down 3 points since this scandal broke. It's not a scandal, Father. I'm seeing someone. People do that every day. Victoria Locke's voice was cold as ice. People don't date their maids, Adrian. Not in our circle. I don't care about our circle, Mother. Clearly. The disdain in her voice was palpable. We've indulged your eccentricities for years. Your refusal to date suitable women. Your insistence on living like a hermit. But this is beyond acceptable. Delilah is worth 10 of the suitable women you've tried to force on me. There was a tense silence. Then Richard Locke spoke again, his voice deadly quiet. End it now, or you're out of the company. No negotiation, no second chances. You'd disown your own son? Adrian's voice was incredulous. We'd be protecting the Locke legacy from your self-destructive behavior, Victoria said coldly. You have until Monday to make your decision. Delilah heard the elevator doors open and close. She stood frozen in the kitchen, tears streaming down her face. When Adrian found her, he didn't need to ask if she'd overheard. He simply took her in his arms and held her tight, as if afraid she might disappear. I won't let them dictate my life, he whispered against her hair. Not anymore. But Delilah could feel the tension in his body, the weight of the choice being forced upon him, and she wondered for the first time if their fragile relationship could survive the storm surrounding them. For 3 days after his parents' ultimatum, Adrian was unusually quiet. Delilah gave him space, continuing her work around the penthouse, while pretending not to notice his frequent phone calls behind closed doors or the growing stack of legal documents on his desk. On Sunday evening, he asked her to stay for dinner. They sat across from each other at the kitchen island, the city lights twinkling beyond the windows. "I've made a decision," Adrian said finally, setting down his fork. "I'm not giving you up, Delilah. Not for my family, not for the company, not for anything." Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by concern. "But what will happen?" "Your father said—" "I know what he said." Adrian reached across the table and took her hand. "I've been meeting with lawyers, setting things in motion. I have money of my own, investments my father doesn't control. It's not billions, but it's enough that we'll never want for anything." Delilah felt dizzy at the implications. "You'd give up everything? For me? We've only known each other for months, Adrian. We've been, whatever this is, for even less time." Adrian's gaze was steady, certain. "I'd give it up for myself too. I never wanted that life. The pressure, the public scrutiny, the endless expectations. I stayed because I thought I had to, because I didn't know there was another way to live." He squeezed her hand. "You showed me there is." The weight of his decision pressed on Delilah's heart. "I'm afraid you'll resent me, that someday you'll wake up and realize what you lost and blame me for it. The only thing I'd resent is letting my parents dictate who I can love." The word hung in the air between them, neither acknowledging it directly. "Tomorrow I'm meeting with my father. I'm going to tell him my decision." Delilah nodded, her heart pounding. "Do you want me to be here?" Adrian hesitated, then shook his head. "I think it's better if you're not. He'll be angry. It might get ugly." That night, as Delilah rode the subway home, her mind was a tangle of emotions. Joy that Adrian had chosen her, fear of what that choice would cost him, and beneath it all, a nagging doubt that their relationship could survive the storm that was coming. The next morning, Delilah called in sick for the first time since she'd started working for Adrian. She couldn't bear the thought of being in the penthouse during his confrontation with his father. Instead, she visited her grandmother, seeking comfort in the familiar small apartment where she'd grown up. Eleanor Moore took one look at her granddaughter's face and put on the kettle. "Trouble with that rich man of yours?" Delilah poured out the whole story. The ultimatum, Adrian's decision, her fears for the future. Eleanor listened without interruption, her weathered hands folded in her lap. "You love him," she said when Delilah finished. It wasn't a question. "I think I do," Delilah admitted. "But is love enough? We come from different worlds. His family hates me. The press won't leave us alone." Eleanor reached out and took Delilah's hand. "Love isn't always enough, but it's a place to start." She patted her granddaughter's cheek. "The question isn't whether you come from different worlds, it's whether you want to build a new world together." Delilah's phone buzzed with a text from Adrian. "It's done. Can you come over?" "Go to him," Eleanor said, seeing the message. "And remember what I always told you, I am not small," Delilah finished with a small smile. "Don't let anyone shrink me." "Not even yourself," her grandmother added softly. When Delilah arrived at the penthouse, she found Adrian in the library, a glass of whiskey in his hand. His face was drawn, his eyes tired. "How did it go?" she asked, sitting beside him on the couch. "About as well as expected." Adrian took a sip of his drink. "My father accused me of throwing away my future. My mother cried and said I was breaking her heart. Then they both threatened me with everything they could think of, cutting me off, removing me from the board, taking away my shares in the company." "I'm so sorry," Delilah whispered, her heart aching for him. Adrian set down his glass and turned to face her. "Don't be. For the first time in my life, I stood up to them. I told them I was done living according to their expectations, that I'd found something real with you and I wasn't going to give that up for their idea of who I should be." He took her hands, his eyes intense. "I told them I love you, Delilah." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Delilah felt tears spring to her eyes. "You barely know me," she said softly. "I know enough." Adrian's voice was firm. "I know you're kind. I know you work harder than anyone I've ever met. I know you light up when you talk about your grandmother. I know you hum when you think no one is listening. I know your favorite book is Their Eyes Were Watching God, because you left it in your bag once and it was so worn I could tell you'd read it a dozen times. He reached up to brush a tear from her cheek. I know that when you smile, I feel like I can breathe for the first time in my life. Delilah couldn't hold back her tears any longer. I love you too, she whispered. And it terrifies me. Adrian pulled her into his arms, holding her as she cried. We'll figure it out together, he promised, whatever comes next. What came next was a media firestorm. News of Adrian's break with his family leaked to the press. The headlines were brutal. Locke heir throws away billions for Maid girlfriend, and Adrian Locke, mental breakdown or just lovesick. Delilah couldn't go anywhere without being followed by photographers. Her phone rang constantly with reporters seeking interviews. Even her grandmother was harassed until Adrian hired security for her building. This will pass, Adrian assured her when Delilah broke down in tears after a particularly vicious article questioning her motives. They'll find someone else to torment soon. But the attention only seemed to grow. Delilah's few friends stopped calling, uncomfortable with her sudden notoriety. Her landlord asked her to move out, citing complaints from other tenants about the reporters lingering outside. Even her job became impossible as photographers staked out the building, making it difficult for her to enter without being harassed. The final straw came when she received a letter from her grandmother's doctor. Someone had leaked Eleanor's medical records to a tabloid, which was running a story suggesting Delilah was using her grandmother's illness to extract money from Adrian. I can't do this anymore, she told Adrian that night, her voice breaking. They're hurting my family now. I never wanted any of this. Adrian looked stricken. Tell me what to do, Delilah. I'll do anything. I need to go away for a while, clear my head. She couldn't look at him as she said it, afraid she would lose her resolve if she saw the pain in his eyes. I need time to figure out if this, us, is worth what it's costing. Delilah, please. I'm not ending things, she said quickly. I just need space. Time to think. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Where will you go? My cousin has a place upstate. No one knows about it. Delilah finally looked up at him. I'll take my grandmother there until things calm down. Adrian nodded slowly. If that's what you need, I understand. He stood up and went to his desk, writing something on a piece of paper. This is the address of a cabin I own in the Catskills. No one knows about it except me. It's yours if you want it, for as long as you need. Delilah took the paper, her fingers brushing against his. Thank you. Will you let me know you're safe, at least? Adrian's voice was carefully controlled, but she could hear the pain beneath it. I will. As Delilah packed her things that night, she felt like she was tearing herself in two. One half desperately wanted to stay with Adrian, to fight through the storm together. The other half needed escape, peace, time to think without the constant pressure of the outside world. In the end, she left while Adrian was sleeping, unable to face the goodbye. She left a note on his pillow. I need time, not distance from you. I'll be back when I know how to be strong enough for this life. All my love. D. The cabin in the Catskills was beautiful, rustic but comfortable, nestled in a clearing surrounded by towering pines. Delilah brought her grandmother there, grateful for the quiet and the space to think. For the first week, she did nothing but sleep and walk in the woods. The constant anxiety that had been her companion for weeks gradually eased. Her grandmother thrived in the mountain air, her color improving, her spirit brightening. He must care for you very much, Eleanor said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. To give you this place to heal? He does, Delilah said softly. And I care for him. But is that enough? Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. When I was young, I loved a man from the other side of the tracks, as they used to say. His family had money, mine had nothing. My mother warned me it would end in heartbreak. What happened? Delilah asked, surprised. Her grandmother rarely spoke about her past. I got scared and ran away. Married your grandfather instead. A good, steady man from my own world. Eleanor smiled sadly. I had a good life with him, but sometimes I wonder what might have been if I'd been brave enough to fight for what I really wanted. Delilah thought about Adrian, His gentle smile, his kind heart, the way he looked at her as if she were the most precious thing in his world. "I don't know if I'm brave enough," she admitted. "Bravery isn't about not being afraid," Eleanor said. "It's about being afraid and doing the thing anyway." That night, Delilah called Adrian for the first time since leaving the city. He answered on the first ring, as if he'd been waiting by the phone. "Delilah?" The hope in his voice made her heart ache. "Hi," she said softly. "I just wanted to hear your voice." They talked for hours. Adrian told her about his new life outside the family business. He was starting his own company, something smaller, focused on sustainable technology. He'd moved out of the penthouse into a brownstone in Brooklyn. He was seeing a therapist to work through his complicated relationship with his parents. "I'm figuring out who I am without them," he told her, "who I want to be." "I'm proud of you," Delilah said, meaning it with her whole heart. "I miss you," Adrian said simply, "but I understand why you needed space. I just want you to know that whenever you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be waiting." After they hung up, Delilah sat on the porch for a long time, looking at the stars. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of clarity. 2 days later, Delilah was making breakfast when she heard a car coming up the gravel driveway. Her heart leapt, thinking it might be Adrian, but when she looked out the window, she saw a sleek black SUV she didn't recognize. A woman stepped out, tall, elegantly dressed, her silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. Victoria Locke. Delilah's stomach dropped. She stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind her to keep her grandmother from overhearing. "Mrs. Locke, how did you find me?" Victoria's face was expressionless. "My son may be naive, but I am not. He's owned this property for years. It wasn't difficult to deduce where you might be hiding." "What do you want?" Delilah asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "To make you an offer." Victoria reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. $1 million, cash, tax-free. "In exchange, you walk away from my son, permanently." Delilah stared at the envelope, a cold feeling spreading through her chest. "You think you can buy me off? Everyone has a price, Ms. Moore." Victoria held out the envelope. "This amount would pay for your grandmother's medical care for the rest of her life, set you up in a new city, give you a fresh start." For a brief, terrible moment, Delilah was tempted. The money would solve so many problems. Her grandmother would never have to worry about medical bills again. She could go back to school, build a new life away from the spotlight. But at what cost? "I love your son, Mrs. Locke," Delilah said quietly, "and he loves me. No amount of money can change that." Victoria's expression hardened. "Love? What do you know about love? You've known him for less than a year. I've loved him his entire life. I've protected him, guided him, built a legacy for him." "Have you?" Delilah challenged. "Or have you just tried to mold him into what you want him to be? When was the last time you asked him what he wants? What makes him happy?" Victoria's composure slipped just for a moment. "I want what's best for him." "No, you want what's best for the Locke name. There's a difference." Delilah took a deep breath. "I won't take your money, Mrs. Locke, and I won't promise to stay away from Adrian. That's his choice, not mine, and certainly not yours." Victoria's face flushed with anger. "You're making a mistake, Ms. Moore. The Locke family has resources you can't begin to imagine. We can make your life very difficult." "You already have," Delilah said simply, "and yet here I am, still standing." After Victoria left, Delilah found her grandmother in the kitchen, calmly making tea as if nothing had happened. "You heard?" Delilah asked. Eleanor nodded. "I always said you were the strongest of us all." She poured 2 cups of tea and handed one to Delilah. "What now?" Delilah took the cup, her mind racing. "Now I need to see Adrian." The brownstone in Brooklyn was modest by Locke standards, a 3-story townhouse on a quiet, tree-lined street. Delilah stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, gathering her courage, before climbing the steps and ringing the bell. The door opened, and there was Adrian. He looked different, his hair longer, his face more relaxed, dressed in jeans and a simple sweater instead of his usual suits. His eyes widened when he saw her. "Delilah, your mother came to see me," she said without preamble. She offered me $1 million to leave you alone. Adrian's face darkened. I'm so sorry. I should have known she'd try something like that. I turned her down. The hope that bloomed in his eyes was almost painful to see. You did? Delilah nodded. I realized something, Adrian. All this time, I've been afraid of the obstacles between us. Your family, the press, our different backgrounds. I've been afraid that love isn't enough to overcome all of that. She took a step closer to him. But I was looking at it all wrong. Love isn't something that has to overcome obstacles. Love is what gives us the strength to face them together. Adrian reached for her, pulling her into his arms. I've missed you so much, he whispered against her hair. I've missed you too. Delilah pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if we can make this work in the long run. But I want to try. Really try. Not just hide away from the world. That's all I want too. Adrian's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. Just a chance to see where this goes. Together. He leaned down and kissed her, a kiss full of promise and hope and possibility. When they broke apart, Delilah felt lighter than she had in months, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Come inside, Adrian said, taking her hand. I want to show you my new home, our new beginning. As Delilah crossed the threshold, she felt a sense of rightness of coming home. Whatever challenges awaited them, and she had no doubt there would be many, they would face them together. And for now, that was enough. The following weeks were a time of adjustment and new beginnings. Delilah moved into Adrian's brownstone, bringing her grandmother to live, with them in the garden apartment on the first floor. Adrian threw himself into his new company, working from the home office he'd set up on the third floor. It wasn't perfect. There were still photographers who occasionally camped outside their door. Adrian's parents made good on their threats, removing him from the board of Lock Industries and challenging his ownership of certain assets. Some of Delilah's old friends remained distant, uncomfortable with her new status. But there were bright spots too. Adrian's brother Maxwell, surprisingly, reached out to mend fences, admitting that he admired Adrian's courage in standing up to their parents. Adrian's assistant from his old office, Sophia, joined his new company, bringing her loyalty and expertise. Delilah found a job at a local community center, teaching literacy classes to adults, work that fulfilled her in ways being a housekeeper never had. And every night, they came home to each other, building the life they wanted, not the one others expected of them. One evening, as they sat on the rooftop garden Adrian had built, watching the sunset over the Brooklyn skyline, he took her hand. I've been thinking, he said, his voice carefully casual, about us, about the future. Delilah turned to look at him. What about it? Adrian seemed suddenly nervous, running his free hand through his hair. I know we've only been together like this for a short time, and I know we still have a lot to figure out. But I also know that I love you, Delilah, more than I thought it was possible to love another person. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Delilah's heart began to race. Adrian, I'm not asking you to marry me. Not yet. He opened the box to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring. This is a promise, that whatever comes next, we face it together, that I'm committed to building a life with you, however long it takes. Tears filled Delilah's eyes as she looked from the ring to Adrian's hopeful face. I don't need a ring to believe in your promises, she said softly. Adrian's face fell slightly. I understand if it's too soon, but, Delilah continued, placing her hand over his, I would be honored to wear it, as my promise to you. The smile that broke across Adrian's face was worth every difficult moment they'd endured. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then cupped her face in his hands. I love you, he whispered, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you. You already are, Delilah assured him, leaning in for a kiss. As the sun set over Brooklyn, casting golden light over the city, Delilah thought about how far they had come, from maid and employer to equals, from strangers to lovers, from loneliness to belonging. It wouldn't be easy. There would be more obstacles, more challenges. But for the first time, Delilah believed that they were strong enough to face whatever came next. Together. 6 months passed. The media frenzy around Adrian and Delilah gradually subsided as newer, more exciting scandals captured the public's attention. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm in the Brooklyn brownstone they now called home. Adrian's new company, Green Future Technologies, was growing steadily. He'd assembled a small team of brilliant engineers who shared his vision for sustainable energy solutions. For the first time in his life, he was doing work he truly believed in, not just what was expected of him. Delilah continued teaching at the community center while taking online classes toward a degree in education. Her grandmother thrived in the garden apartment, tending to the small backyard garden and befriending the neighbors. The three of them had dinner together most evenings, sharing stories and laughter in a way Adrian had never experienced in his own family. "You seem happy," Delilah said one night as they sat on the rooftop garden, the promise ring glinting on her finger in the soft lighting. Adrian smiled, pulling her closer. "I am happy, happier than I've ever been." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Thank you for giving me a real family." Life wasn't perfect. Adrian still struggled with the loss of his family's approval. The legal battles over his company's shares continued, draining both time and money. Occasionally, a particularly persistent reporter would publish a speculative piece about their relationship, dredging up old gossip. But through it all, their bond only strengthened. The man who had never kissed anyone until Delilah now built his life around loving her, and the woman who had once been invisible to the wealthy people she worked for now stood confidently by the side of a man who saw her, truly saw her, for exactly who she was. One rainy Saturday morning, Delilah was sorting through mail when she came across an elegant cream envelope addressed to Adrian. The Locke family crest was embossed in gold on the back. "Adrian," she called up the stairs, "there's something here from your family." Adrian appeared from his office, his expression wary as he took the envelope. He opened it carefully, pulling out a heavy card. His face remained unreadable as he scanned the contents. "What is it?" Delilah asked. "An invitation to my brother's engagement party." Adrian handed her the card. "Maxwell is getting married to Sophia." "Your old assistant?" Delilah was stunned. Sophia had become a dear friend since joining Adrian's new company, but she'd never mentioned any relationship with Maxwell. Apparently, they reconnected at some charity event a few months ago. Adrian ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Delilah had come to recognize as a sign of stress. "The party is at my parents' estate. The invitation is addressed to both of us." Delilah studied the elegant script that included both their names. "Do you want to go?" Adrian paced the room, his brow furrowed. "I don't know. Maxwell and I have been talking again. He's different lately, less focused on pleasing our parents, more on finding his own path. And I like Sophia. I want to support them." He stopped and looked at Delilah. "But I don't want to put you in an uncomfortable position. My parents will be there." "I can handle your parents," Delilah said more confidently than she felt. "The question is, are you ready to face them again?" Adrian was quiet for a long moment. "I think I am. I'm not the same person they tried to control. I've built something of my own now." He took her hand, his thumb brushing over the promise ring. "With you," Delilah squeezed his hand. "Then we'll go together." The Locke family estate was even more imposing than Delilah had imagined, a sprawling mansion set on manicured grounds in Greenwich, Connecticut. As their car pulled through the gates, Delilah felt her anxiety rising. "We can still turn around," Adrian said softly, noticing her tension. Delilah straightened her shoulders, hearing her grandmother's voice in her mind. "You are not small. Don't let anyone shrink you. No, we belong here as much as anyone." The engagement party was in full swing when they arrived. Elegant guests in designer clothes mingled on the terrace and in the grand ballroom. Conversations paused as Adrian and Delilah entered, curious eyes taking in the couple who had caused such a scandal in high society. Maxwell spotted them immediately and broke into a wide smile, weaving through the crowd with Sophia on his arm. "You came," he exclaimed, embracing his brother. "I wasn't sure you would." "Wouldn't miss it," Adrian replied, looking genuinely happy to see his brother. Congratulations, both of you. Sophia hugged Delilah warmly. I'm so glad you're here, she whispered. I was terrified of facing this crowd alone. As they made small talk, Delilah was acutely aware of the whispers and stares around them, but she held her head high, remembering that she was here as Adrian's equal, not as someone's employee. Adrian. The voice cut through the ambient noise of the party. Victoria Locke approached, elegant as ever in a tailored navy dress, her expression carefully neutral. Richard Locke followed a step behind, his face set in stern lines. Mother, father. Adrian's voice was cool but polite. Congratulations on Maxwell and Sophia's engagement. Victoria's gaze flickered to Delilah, then back to her son. Thank you for coming, it means a lot to your brother. The formal politeness was a far cry from their last encounter, but Delilah supposed it was a start. Ms. Moore, Richard Locke acknowledged her with a slight nod. I understand you're teaching now. Delilah was surprised he knew anything about her life. Yes, at a community center in Brooklyn. Adult literacy. Commendable work. It wasn't exactly warm, but it wasn't hostile either. A server approached with champagne. As the awkward conversation continued, Delilah noticed Victoria watching her closely, as if trying to solve a puzzle. If you'll excuse us, Adrian said after a few minutes of stilted small talk, we should congratulate some of the other guests. As they moved away, Delilah let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That wasn't as bad as I expected. Adrian smiled ruefully. The night is young. They circulated through the party, Adrian introducing Delilah to business associates and family friends. Some were welcoming, others barely concealed their disdain. Delilah took it all in stride, refusing to be intimidated. Later, as Delilah was returning from the powder room, she overheard voices from a partially open door, Victoria and Richard Locke. She's not what I expected, Victoria was saying. There's a dignity about her. She still cost us our son, Richard replied gruffly, and nearly cost us the company with that PR nightmare. Did she? Or did we drive him away with our expectations? Victoria sounded tired. Maxwell says Adrian's company is doing well, that he's happier than he's ever been. He could have been happy running Locke Industries, Richard insisted, if he'd just followed the plan. Could he? He was miserable for years, Richard. We both saw it and chose to ignore it. Delilah moved away, not wanting to be caught eavesdropping. The conversation gave her a new perspective on Adrian's mother. Perhaps there was more complexity there than she'd thought. She found Adrian on the terrace, looking out at the grounds where he'd grown up. There you are, he said, smiling as she approached. I was about to send out a search party. Just getting the lay of the land. Delilah leaned against the railing beside him. It's beautiful here. It is, but it never felt like home. Adrian took her hand. Not like our place in Brooklyn. Before Delilah could respond, Maxwell appeared, looking flushed and excited. There you are. Come on. We're about to make the official announcement. They followed him back to the ballroom, where Sophia waited by a small stage. A band had been playing soft music throughout the evening, but now fell silent as Richard Locke stepped up to a microphone. Friends and family, thank you for joining us tonight to celebrate the engagement of my son Maxwell to the lovely Sophia Chen. Applause rippled through the crowd. Maxwell took Sophia's hand and joined his father on the stage. Before we make the official announcement, there's something else I'd like to say. Maxwell took the microphone, his expression serious. Many of you know that our family has been through some changes this past year. Murmurs spread through the room. Delilah felt Adrian tense beside her. My brother Adrian made choices that surprised us all, choices that went against our family traditions. Maxwell's gaze found Adrian in the crowd. At the time, I didn't understand, but now, having found love myself, I do. He smiled at Sophia, who looked radiant beside him. Adrian had the courage to follow his heart, regardless of the consequences, and seeing him now, I know he made the right choice. Maxwell raised his glass. So tonight, I want to toast not just my engagement, but my brother's happiness as well. to Adrian and Delilah. A shocked silence fell over the room, followed by a smattering of uncertain applause. Adrian stood frozen, clearly stunned by his brother's public support. Richard Locke looked thunderous. Victoria's expression was unreadable, but Maxwell continued, undeterred. "And there's one more announcement tonight." He looked toward his parents. "Sophia and I have decided that Adrian will be my best man, and we'd like his company, Green Future Technologies, to partner with Locke Industries on a new sustainable energy initiative. It's time to heal the rift in our family and our business." The crowd buzzed with excitement at this unexpected news. Richard began to protest, but Victoria placed a hand on his arm, whispering something in his ear. After a tense moment, he nodded curtly. Adrian squeezed Delilah's hand, emotion evident on his face. As the formal announcements continued, Victoria Locke made her way through the crowd toward them. "Ms. Moore, may I speak with you privately?" Her tone was polite but left no room for refusal. Delilah glanced at Adrian, who nodded encouragingly. "I'll be fine," she assured him before following Victoria into a quiet study off the main hall. Victoria closed the door and moved to a small bar cart, pouring 2 glasses of bourbon. She handed one to Delilah. "I owe you an apology," she said without preamble. "My behavior toward you has been inexcusable." Delilah accepted the drink but didn't respond, waiting for Victoria to continue. "I believed I knew what was best for my son. I was wrong." Victoria took a sip of her bourbon. "Adrian has always been different from Maxwell, quieter, more introspective. I worried about him." She met Delilah's gaze directly. "But I've never seen him as alive as he is with you." "I love your son, Mrs. Locke," Delilah said simply. "Not his money, not his name, just him." "I believe you do." Victoria set down her glass. "I can't promise Richard will come around quickly. He's stubborn and set in his ways, but I would like to try to be part of Adrian's life again. And yours." Delilah considered the woman before her, proud, flawed, but clearly making an effort. "I think Adrian would like that, and so would I." When they returned to the party, Adrian was deep in conversation with Maxwell and several business associates. He looked up when Delilah approached, a question in his eyes. "Everything okay?" he asked quietly. Delilah smiled. "Getting there." As the evening wound down, Adrian and Delilah said their goodbyes. Victoria hugged her son, stiffly, but it was a start. Richard shook Adrian's hand and nodded to Delilah, which was more than she'd expected. In the car on the way home, Adrian was quiet, processing the events of the night. "Your brother really came through," Delilah said, breaking the silence. "He did." Adrian shook his head in wonder. "I never expected that kind of public support, or the business proposition." He turned to look at her. "And what did my mother want?" "To apologize in her way, and to say she wants to be part of our lives." Adrian looked skeptical. "Just like that? After everything she said and did?" "It's a start," Delilah said softly. "People can change, Adrian. Even Victoria Locke." He took her hand, bringing it to his lips. "Thank you for being there tonight, for facing them with me." "Always," she promised. 2 weeks later, Adrian and Delilah hosted Sunday dinner at their brownstone. It was a small gathering: Eleanor, Maxwell and Sophia, and, most surprisingly, Victoria Locke. Richard had declined the invitation, not yet ready for such an intimate setting. The atmosphere was tense at first, Victoria clearly uncomfortable in the modest home. But Eleanor, with her straightforward warmth, broke the ice. "So, you're the famous Mrs. Locke," she said, handing Victoria a glass of wine. "I've heard a lot about you." "I imagine you have," Victoria replied stiffly. "Most of it bad," Eleanor acknowledged with a chuckle. "But I raised my granddaughter to see the good in people, and anyone who's raised a son as fine as Adrian must have some good in them." Victoria seemed startled by the compliment. Thank you." As the evening progressed, the conversation flowed more easily. Maxwell and Sophia shared details about their wedding plans. Victoria, to everyone's surprise, offered thoughtful input about Adrian's business ideas. Eleanor told stories about Delilah's childhood that made everyone laugh. Later, As Delilah and Adrian cleared the dinner dishes, he leaned over and kissed her cheek. "What was that for?" she asked, smiling. "For making this possible. A real family dinner. Something I never thought I'd have." From the dining room came the sound of Eleanor's distinctive laugh, followed by Victoria's more reserved chuckle. It wasn't perfect harmony, but it was a beginning. 1 year to the day after their first kiss in the library of the penthouse, Adrian took Delilah back to the Catskills cabin where she had gone to find clarity. The leaves were turning brilliant shades of red and gold, the air crisp with the promise of autumn. "Why are we here?" Delilah asked as they arrived, curious about the surprise trip. "I wanted to come back to where you made your decision," Adrian said, taking her hand as they walked toward the cabin. "Where you chose us despite everything." Inside, a fire was already burning in the hearth, the cabin warm and welcoming. On the coffee table was a small wrapped package. "What's this?" Delilah asked, picking it up. "Open it and see." Inside was a small velvet box, similar to the one that had held her promise ring. But when she opened it, she found not jewelry but a key. "A key?" she asked, confused. "To the penthouse," Adrian explained. "I bought it back last week." Delilah stared at him in surprise. "But why? You love the brownstone." "I do, and we're keeping it." Adrian sat beside her, taking her hands in his. "But the penthouse is where we began, where I first felt everything. I thought maybe we could use it sometimes, for special occasions. Or if you want to be closer to the community center some days." Delilah was touched by the gesture. "That's very thoughtful, but I sense there's more to this surprise." Adrian smiled, his eyes warm with love. "There is." He took a deep breath. "Delilah Moore, a year ago, I gave you a ring as a promise. Today, I'm asking if you're ready to make a different promise." He slid from the couch to one knee, pulling another small box from his pocket. Inside was a stunning but tasteful diamond ring. "Will you marry me? Be my wife, my partner, my family, officially and forever?" Tears filled Delilah's eyes. "Are you sure your father has agreed to attend the wedding?" Adrian finished for her. "It took a year, but he's coming around. Slowly, but even if he never did, it wouldn't change my mind." He looked up at her, vulnerability and hope in his eyes. "I love you, Delilah. I want to spend the rest of my life with you." "Yes," she whispered, joy bursting in her chest. "Yes, I'll marry you." Adrian slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the love and passion that had grown between them over the past year. Later, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and crimson, Delilah leaned her head on Adrian's shoulder. "Did you ever imagine we'd end up here?" she asked. "That first day when I was just the maid cleaning your penthouse?" Adrian smiled, wrapping his arm around her. "I didn't know it then, but I think my heart recognized something in you from the very beginning, something that woke me up." "And now?" Delilah asked, looking up at him. "Now, I'm fully awake," Adrian said softly, "and I'm never going back to sleep." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Delilah thought about the journey that had brought them here. From employer and employee to equals, from strangers to lovers, from two lonely souls to a family. It hadn't been easy. There had been pain and sacrifice and difficult choices, but sitting here in the arms of the man who had given her his first kiss and his heart, Delilah knew that every step had been worth it, because some loves are worth fighting for, some loves change everything. And sometimes, the most unexpected person turns out to be the one who makes you feel everything for the very first time. 2 months later, on a crisp December morning, Delilah stood in a small room at the back of the Brooklyn Botanic Gardens Palm House, her grandmother helping her with the final touches of her wedding dress. "You look beautiful, child," Eleanor said, tears in her eyes as she adjusted Delilah's veil. There was a knock at the door. To Delilah's surprise, Victoria Locke entered, elegant in a pale blue suit. "May I have a moment?" she asked. Eleanor squeezed Delilah's hand and slipped out, leaving the two women alone. "You make a lovely bride," Victoria said, her usual reserve softened with genuine warmth. "Thank you," Delilah replied, "and thank you for all your help with the arrangements." Victoria waved away the thanks. It was the least I could do after... She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. They both remembered the $1 million bribe, the threats, the disapproval. "I brought you something," Victoria said, opening her clutch and pulling out a small box. "It's tradition in our family for the mother of the groom to give the bride something on her wedding day." Inside the box was a delicate pearl bracelet, simple but elegant. "It was my grandmother's," Victoria explained. "Not as flashy as most lock jewelry, but I thought it might suit you better." Delilah was touched by the gesture. "It's beautiful. Thank you." Victoria hesitated, then said, "I know I haven't been the mother-in-law you deserved, but I want you to know that I see now what my son saw from the beginning. Your strength, your dignity, your heart." She clasped the bracelet around Delilah's wrist. "Welcome to the family, Delilah, officially." As Victoria left, Delilah felt a sense of completion, of circles closing. When her grandmother returned with Sophia, who was serving as her maid of honor, she was ready. "It's time," Sophia said with a smile. The ceremony was intimate. Just 50 guests in the glass-enclosed palm house, surrounded by lush greenery despite the winter chill outside. Maxwell stood beside Adrian as best man. Richard and Victoria Locke sat in the front row, Richard looking uncomfortable but present. But Delilah saw none of them as she walked down the aisle on her grandmother's arm. She saw only Adrian, waiting for her, with eyes full of love and wonder. As they exchanged vows, Adrian's voice was steady and sure, so different from the hesitant man who had given her his first kiss just over a year ago. "Delilah Moore," he said, sliding the wedding band onto her finger, "you taught me what it means to feel, to love, to live. Today, I promise to spend the rest of my life showing you just how grateful I am for that gift." When they were pronounced husband and wife, Adrian cupped her face in his hands, just as he had that rainy night in the penthouse library. His kiss was no longer hesitant but confident, full of promise and passion, and the certainty of a lifetime together. At the reception, they danced their first dance as husband and wife to the gospel hymn Delilah had been humming the day Adrian first spoke to her about something other than household matters. As they swayed together, surrounded by the people who had become their combined family, Delilah felt a sense of rightness, of coming full circle. "Happy," Adrian whispered in her ear. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied truthfully. Later, as they prepared to leave for their honeymoon, Adrian pulled her aside for a moment of privacy. "I have something for you," he said, handing her a small wrapped package. Inside was a journal bound in soft leather. On the first page, Adrian had written, "For Delilah Locke, the story of us, from the first moment to forever." "I thought we could write our story together," Adrian explained, "so we never forget how it all began." Delilah traced the words with her fingertip, emotion welling in her throat. "I love it, and I love you." "And I love you," Adrian said, pulling her close. "The maid who taught the billionaire how to feel." As they walked out to the waiting car, surrounded by the cheers and well-wishes of their guests, Delilah thought about the journey that had brought them here, from employer and employee, from first kiss to forever, from two lonely souls to a family bound by choice and love. Their story wasn't a fairy tale. It was something better, something real, and it was just beginning. The end.